Hey, good morning, Chavra. Today is Dalid Tammuz. We're on page 75 in the Chayenu, and we will be completing chapter 11, Perikut Aleph in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah. In today's lesson, although the Torah employs the analogy of speech, we began this concept yesterday. Actually, it's a continuation. The concept of the analogy of speech is a tool of articulation, and it in itself void of meaning. It doesn't make sense for us to say that God spoke, God doesn't have a mouth, but it's just in order for human beings to better understand what's taking place. Nevertheless, Hashem's words are far superior than the greatest human wisdom. That would seem obvious. In truth, however, obviously, the letters of speech are far higher than the level and essence of the wisdom and intellect of created beings as far as the words, the utterances, so to speak, of Hashem are concerned. In this, they differ from the letters of man's thought and speech, which are inanimate and belong to the level far lower than intellect. Man, the possessor of wisdom and intellect, was created by the utterances and letters of a phrase, let us make man in our image. With words that let us make man in our image, Abishai created every single aspect of a human being, including his intellect and wisdom. So since wisdom and intellect are derived from these letters, it's obvious that the letters themselves are far superior to, it's the one who creates, obviously, has a tremendous advantage, physically, spiritually, in all ways. Or man, again, man who has wisdom and intellect was created even by the divine breath alone, as it is written, and Hashem breathed into his nostrils the soul of life. Again, where did this come from? From the breath of life that was breathed into man, that he became a rational being. God doesn't breathe, God doesn't have a mouth, but this is the way the Torah describes Adam being created. So since divine speech and breath create man who possess wisdom and intellect, it follows that the divine speech and breath are the source of wisdom and intellect in the soul of man. Again, whatever that means, it's not in a literal sense, it can't be in a literal sense. The Abishur doesn't have breath, doesn't have mouth. But for whatever that means, for our purposes, we use that as a descriptive term. That obviously is far greater because in one breath, quote unquote, suddenly man comes into being. Adam is alive now with all his limbs and organs and sinews and blood vessels and not only that, but his thoughts. Akelela is called Nishmei Satzadikim. So Adam Rishon contained all the souls of the tzaddikim, really all the souls of all future human beings. Shehein Gedolim Mimalchi Hasharim. But the souls of tzaddikim are superior to the ministering angels, whose intellect too is superior to that of the regular angels. All this came forth from the divine speech and breath. Behind. And for this reason, the Pisha Oisis Diburi Yisparechem Mechinas Amshachas Kerches V'Kais Mimadere Goiso. The reason for the transcendence of the supernal letters over the soul is that the letters of Hashem's speech, again, are effluences. These are powerful energies and life forces from Hashem's emotive attributes. Of course, we know, as we're about to say, that everything from Hashem's perspective is all one. But the way the Chacham described it was that Hashem used different emotive attributes to do different things. But when we talk about the power and life force to create, these are one of the attributes. But it's completely united with the essence and being in perfect unity with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. the perfect unity that's infinitely higher than the level of wisdom in created beings. And it could be one thought of the Eibishter. It's higher than all created beings. The term letters not in relation to created beings, but only relative to God's emotive attributes themselves. We call them letters. So the name letters, quote unquote, which signifies that they're lower than wisdom and intellect, because you have a thought, and then you say the thought with words, and that expresses your thought. So it's even lower than wisdom and intellect. And it's not applied to them in relation to created beings, as explained earlier. Again, these are God's thoughts, so to speak, God's words, the letters that put together the words. They're far superior to created wisdom and intellect, but rather this term is applied to them relative to God's emotive attributes, inasmuch as they are only letters, which are revelations of these attributes. As we said before, when you speak the words and you put them together through different combinations, and you make the word, whatever that word may be, he say shulchan, Evan, very stone. Then the thing comes out. Now the supernal letters are 22 kinds of effluences, flows of life force and power, differing from one another. By which all the higher worlds and lower worlds, all the creatures in them were created. So it arose in Hashem's will and wisdom that He create the world with 22 different kinds of powerful flows of godly energy, not less and not more. 22. These are the 22 letters which are fixed in the mouth and tongue, as we've learned in Sefer Yetzirah. Usmunason b'chsav hi moira al tzior ha'amshocha come on. Their written shape, not only the verbalization and the articulation and the sound, but even the written shape of the letters of these utterances as written in the Torah, the way they look, the shape of the letter, including the crowns, indicates the form of the flow, as Alter is going to get to later on. So it's not just the way they sound, how they come out of your mouth, but also the way they look and the way they're written. Every letter, that's why in the Torah, every single letter has to be written exactly a certain way, and that's it. It's the shape as well is something that's critically important. Shagam oisiyos hadibor v'hamachshava shebenefesh ha'adam hein hamshachos mehasecho v'hamidas shebenefesh memahuson v'atzmusik meshspar v'mokem acher. The letters of speech and thought in the human soul are also outflows from this essence and being of the intellect and the emotive attributes, as explained elsewhere. So our wisdom, our speech, our thought all come from these letters that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, quote unquote, so to speak, spoke. And not only are they important in sound, but also in visual, in shape. And that lends itself not just to the creation of the human being, but also everything, every thought, every speech, every emotion of the human being comes from these letters that Hashem used to create us. So the takeaway is man's words are articulated by their intellect. Hashem's words and letters are his mode of expression to create intellect and everything else. Very powerful stuff. Meditate on that as we enter into Shabbos Kodesh. And we'll see you all. Mitzvah Hashem, have a wonderful day and a good Shabbos.